I'm going to sit on the stool here to try and make it feel a little more like a campfire. I feel a little more comfortable in that environment. I live in New Hampshire in the woods, so there's a lot of campfires in my life. But thank you all for coming. I guess I was thinking that, man, it's amazing to get people here at 10 o'clock on a work day, but then I realized we're all creative, so we don't have real jobs. So it's a lucky thing for me. I was also thinking a little bit about the theme of growth, and of course, there's definitely the personal kind and the spiritual kind and many other kinds that I spent a good part of my career thinking about. There's also the sort of traditional, stock chart up and to the right kind, and I've had some experience with that. I think there's a talk on that on the 12th floor of Related right now if anyone would like to go, but my talk is more like that. It's a mountain range of ups and downs professionally and personally, so it's great to be able to share it. It's not something I've done very much. So I guess I should start probably at the very far beginning. My dad is a Austrian immigrant, and I think characterizes many of the stereotypes of an Austrian immigrant. He's very driven and very rigid in a lot of ways, very analytical, but also became an entrepreneur, risk taker, and very moral person. So, learned a lot from him, but one thing that I would say that more than anything characterizes him, he's deeply contrarian. And my mom is kind of the opposite. She's American, and she's very easygoing, happy, outgoing person, but also at her core, deeply contrarian. And so I have this sort of nonconformist, roots or contrarian roots, maybe a certain form, I think, in the personality trait of disagreeableness. I've later learned that disagreeableness is actually one of the key characteristics to becoming an entrepreneur at anything. It's actually having high disagreeability is somehow a superpower when you're creating something. So at any rate, I didn't really know that, but when I was growing up, I suppose there was this push-pull in my head in the creative side of things between what is, I guess the left brain and right brain, between the creative side of me. I was always passionate about music and the arts and, interested in writing and literature. And then at the same time, I was, interested in business and analytics and good at math. And I think I sort of as a person, I started to feel like there was a curse of general competence, but a lack of specific excellence. You think about that? So, I would play guitar and I was passionate about it, but there was always somebody who was better than me. There was always somebody who was better than me in math. And it left me in this position where I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And so I did what I think everyone does when they generally get good grades and they don't know what to do with their life, which is that I went to law school. And so I did finish law school, and I passed the bar, and I got a great job with Skadden Arps, who has, I think, since distinguished themselves by capitulating to Trump more rapidly than the other law firms. But I had a great job for about 2 years. But the one thing I learned was that I didn't want to be any of the people that I worked with. I was looking at the partners, and there were some great people, or people who were art collectors and sports enthusiasts and just really interesting, smart people, but I just didn't want their life. And I had this complete epiphany. And right around all through that time, I was playing music and sort of part of the scene of musicians who were happening downtown, New York. It was sort of like a acid jazz scene that was going on, very popular in the late 90s, and I was in that world. And at one point, my friend and soon-to-be business partner, Jeff, sent me a disc, a CD that that his brother had recorded in a farmhouse in Vermont. And it was just this EP of this like new kind of soul jazz vibe from a band called Soul Live. And I had been talking with Jeff literally about 5 years about someday I'm going to quit my job and we're going to start a record label. And I heard this record, and I called Jeff up and I was like, well, this is it. You want to do it? And he said, sure. And so literally I quit my job, and he had opened, with my help, this recording studio in Lower Manhattan, which was possibly the worst place ever to exist. It was like this rat-infested building in Lower Manhattan. It was the off Wall Street jam. So you can imagine it was like the worst bands rehearsing. at all times of day. And our offices were outside of the studio where bands would play Mustang Sally repetitively for 8 hours straight. And we we set up shop with about 2 employees. We took this EP and we started to, work it. I didn't know anything about running a record label. I guess, some legal experience was helpful, but we signed this band Soul Live and sat there listening to Mustang Sally for about 3 or 4 months till, lo and behold, a bidding war broke out between Blue Note and Verve. These are 2 of the biggest jazz record labels, huge, legendary things. And having had absolutely no idea what I was doing, and also having had no money, we had signed the band to a 1-record deal. I don't know if any of you immediately can get the implication of that, but what happened was, of course, there was a bidding war. The band said, bye, and signed with Blue Note. And suddenly we were sitting there, having spent a year developing this artist and seen them hit success, and we had nothing. We had, 1 record that we had recorded with them, and they were gone. And so this was like a crushing blow. But this is where one of the, valleys turn into peaks. The Bruce Lundvall, who is the legendary leader of Blue Note Records, took our record to Japan. And he was trying to show to his Japanese partners at Toshiba EMI how amazing this new band was. He had no other record. He hadn't recorded one yet. And the Japanese lost their minds. They thought it was the greatest record that ever happened. And within, I think you guys have seen that ad where the guy's sitting in front of a computer and he sees 1 order, and then he sees 10 orders, and then has 1 million orders, and he's like, well, that happened to us. The Japanese started buying literally tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of records and importing them straight. I couldn't afford to pay for the manufacturing because this record started to go. And so, it was just the blindest thing of luck. And so that established us at this record label. And, I would say two things happened out of this experience. I mean, one, you realize just how incredibly much good fortune was, because after that, it was another 3 or 4 years before we had any success with any artist or anything again. And we were sort of always going on this like peak and valley. But a couple things happened that were really cool. One is that we had moved offices finally out of the Wall Street jam, and upstairs, my partner Jeff's wife opened a yoga studio, and we started having this very strange, your chocolate in my peanut butter, kind of your booze in my kombucha. I don't know what it was, but it was like musicians and late night scene mingling with daytime yoga studio wellness, environment. And this cross-pollinated and started to create some ideas. And we had also, that same time, very much our bands were playing in like Bonnaroo and Austin City Limits and some of these first generation or this new generation of music festivals that were popping up then. And so at any rate, we wanted to create our own. And we started to have this crazy idea of like, well, what if you combined all the things that were great about this burgeoning wellness culture, yoga and meditation and being in nature and mindfulness and all of these things, and then you brought in the world's greatest bands, and you had like by day this concept of personal and spiritual exploration and health and wellness, and then by night you could celebrate and hang out. And it was a great idea, I think, but it was also at the time seen as completely lunatic. Like in 2008, yoga was ascendant, but it was still very much like a spiritual practice. It was not something that was just generally in culture. And there was very much a schism between a music festival audience and what one would think of as a yoga retreat culture. And so we had, made relationships, and we raised some money, and we found a location. And I mean, this is like as grassroots as it comes. It was like me and Jeff hanging flyers on telephone poles in, California somewhere in near Squaw Valley, where we did the event first. And, we launched it. And, I suppose like all great ideas that were before their time, it, completely failed. We had the greatest lineup of indie rock, and like there was like everyone from Spoon and Gillian Welch and Sharon Jones, and I mean I could go, I think there's like 50 amazing bands in there. And then at the same time, we had, the greatest yoga teachers around. It was like Shiva Ray and Sean Corn and like everybody at the thing. And it was in the most beautiful location in the world. But basically everyone who wanted to buy a music ticket just was like, I'm not going there, there's yoga. And then all the yogis loved it, but there were like 200 of them. And so it was, once again, like we entered into this thing and lost our shirts, honestly. And the good blessing there was that our partners were, very big players in the music business, actually. And they were willing to put up some more money, and so we tried it again. So we came back and realized, okay, this is actually a yoga and wellness event, and we were able to completely reimagine it. So it became much more about the wellness, with like the music being the cherry on top. And the next year it just exploded. And that leads to my observations on growth. And it became so big. And at our peak, I think we had 5,000 or 6,000 people at the Squaw Valley event. We had, by one point, as mentioned before, we had 65 events in 20 countries by 2018 that were happening under the Wanderlust brand. We had over 200,000 people in a year were going to a Wanderlust around the globe. And we expanded into media. We reimagined the yoga center as this sort of like creative, like Soho house of yoga. We did so many things. And I think in the process of doing so many things, you sort of realize there are kernels of what makes something absolutely unique and something beautiful and valuable. And some of those kernels can't be scaled. Like digital businesses can be scaled. In-person community businesses, it's very difficult. You can maybe scale them in one place, or maybe you can go to 2 places or 3 places. But when you go to 20 or 30, inevitably, I think something gets lost, something in the experience, something in the community, something in the culture. And so, we started to realize by about 2018 that, we had grown, we had flown too close to the sun. And the core concept was there. Wellness was still exploding. We had every reason to think we could rebuild it. So 2019 came in, we completed that season, and I raised more money, and I had a whole new plan to come back and reimagine the core festival experience in 2020, and everything was lined up. It wasn't easy, I'm gonna say. There was an incredible amount of pressure. I had 80 employees at the beginning of 2019, and I had 4 at the end of 2019. It was wrenching, as these things always are. These people were, my friends. And but we got through that, and then I got into early 2020, and then you guys will remember what happened then. So COVID happened, and it would be hard, whether or not you think the virus was grown in a lab, it was definitely grown to specifically target Wanderlust. because everything about it was designed to destroy the business we had. It was like, we had a in-person yoga center, which was like, packing bodies together in LA, which was completely shut down. We had mass participation events, which were completely shut down. The only thing we had is this tiny little online instructional yoga business, and we had that, and that grew a little bit. But that was it. So 98% of our business just went boom, 0, done. And then came, and I'll get back to this theme of my unfortunate relationship with the U.S. government, but there was a grant given to everyone in the universe who was in the entertainment industry, and that was millions of dollars. It would have been millions of dollars from us. It was basically called Save Our Stages. It was a government program to help entertainment businesses who got crushed during COVID. And I applied and was denied. And why was I denied? Well, because they said we were primarily a yoga business and we weren't entertainment. And I was like, but we spend more money on musical performers than we do on anything else. And they were like, nope. I appealed, denied again. I sued the US government, denied again, lost. You never win when you sue the US government. I probably should have known that. But at any rate, that led to a place where, really the only rational thing to do. I had these amazing partners in Australia. They had been developing a line of supplements around Wanderlust. They were already investors in the company. They were interested in taking the whole thing. And I realized it was time for me to go. And it had been 15 years from 2009 to 2023. And it was one of those things where obviously an incredibly difficult decision. It was my career and my founding company and everything about it. And I sold the company, and I sat in the woods of New Hampshire contemplating all sorts of things for, some time. Benefits were spending a lot of time with my family, getting healthy, getting in shape, and really having some time to think about what it was that made, I guess, Wanderlust great, and also sort of inspired me to do it. And I think for me, the things that the vision, was reborn in a lot of ways for me as Eudemonia. That word, which, by the way, no one can pronounce. So I know you're all creatives, and if you're wondering who did the branding, I'm sorry. But the word is just too good to leave out, even though no one can pronounce it. And it's this Greek concept of life well lived or human flourishing, but it's really meant not in the fleeting sense of happiness, but actually more in the deeper sense of having fulfilled an innate purpose. And obviously, the way I started to think about it, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with Maslow's pyramid, the hierarchy of needs, and somewhere on the bottom there's safety and security and food and relationships, and you kind of move up. And obviously health is a fundamental building block to even get up that pyramid towards self-actualization or towards where you want to be in life. And so it seemed to me, with my experience with Wanderlust and the growing passion for health, that that's a wonderful place to start. But I guess from the beginning, it wasn't going to stop there, right? The idea was you build on your health so that you can achieve mental health, so that you can become well, so that you can achieve whatever your purpose is. And somewhere along the way, I guess I started to realize that community may be the best antidote we have to, why is it that we are all struggling so hard in our health? It's a really interesting thing to think about it, because we're awash in information. You can go to any podcast. Everyone knows the building blocks of, sleep, nutrition, and exercise, and you don't really need. So what is it that's missing, And I think in a lot of ways it's things like this. It's, people getting together, it's self-reinforcing, it's supportive, it's changing unhealthy habits, it's adding in healthy habits and doing that in community. And, but I guess I just didn't want to stop at just health, because I think that in some ways that focus is too narrow. And I suppose if there's anything for me that differentiates what Eudemonia is, it's like that its true purpose is to really achieve self-actualization, to really achieve a deeper sense of purpose and meaning after building on all the steps that you need to get there. And so, over time, that's I think what drew me back. And so, the starting of this was it was a process. I'm blessed to have been, I think there were a lot of people who were touched by the Wanderlust mission, and no one less than actually the wonderful Discover the Palm Beaches, who is actually York County Tourism Office here, who really chased me for a long time to actually bring a health and wellness event, a really bespoke, cool, and hopefully world-class health and wellness event to this community. And they really made it possible for me to achieve this vision, and along with of course all the other usual things you have to do, like raise a lot of money and sweat and worry about going bankrupt, all the usual stuff. But it's amazing to be here, and I hope you all can experience it. It's just it is Wanderlust was very much part of something that I thought of as a transformational festival, and I use those words because I think that there are certain types of events that can change you as you go through them, and you come out a slightly different person than you went into them. And I think that's very much the goal with Eudemonia, and I hope you can all experience it. I'll pause there.